Here's the thing about being stuck on a boat in a storm. It doesn't take a lot to get scared pretty quickly. The Sea of Galilee, or Lake Gennesaret, two names for the same body of water, is not particularly a large body of water. It's about 13 miles long and 8 miles wide. Lake Roosevelt is 22 miles long, but only a couple miles wide for comparison. The Sea of Galilee is also known for quick-rising storms. They tend not to last very long, but the wind is particularly violent on that lake. This is as true today as it was in Jesus' day. We just have the ability to predict the weather now, at least far better than those disciples did. The boat they were in also wasn't particularly large. Even modern fishing boats tend to be pretty small, especially the freshwater variety. They get tossed about readily, and if you're stuck in one, a storm means seeking safety quickly. Although there were some pretty large boats in the ancient world, it's unlikely the disciples had them. They belonged to wealthier peoples and nations, especially ones that sailed larger seas. In fact, the Philistines, the ones of Goliath fame, had some of the most advanced boats in the ancient Near Eastern world. The disciples' fear is amplified because there are few resources for rescue. I don't actually know if there was an ancient search and rescue, but nothing compared to modern versions. In a small body of water like this one, a very skilled swimmer, the kind who swims across one of the Great Lakes for fun, would require a couple of hours at least to make it 4 miles in open water, swimming in good conditions. Olympic champion swimmer Michael Phelps might make it in under an hour, but that's a stretch even for him in open water. Add in a storm, and the best swimmers in the world would struggle to make it out alive of a capsized or sinking boat. And I don't even know if swimming was a leisure activity in those days, though I assume it was still possible to rescue yourself. So when you put all that together, the disciples have plenty of reason to be scared out there. They're bailing water as fast as they can. They're trying to keep their boat from sinking. They're also haunted by other possibilities of what might be out there in the water. Even today, we see articles about strange creatures that live out in the deep sea, so different from the sort of creatures we're used to. Here's just one, a frilled shark. It's often called a living fossil because it hasn't evolved all that much in the last 80 million years. It has 300 teeth over 25 rows. The name refers to its 6 rows of gills, and it's believed to live only in very deep water, depths of several hundred to several thousand feet. People who encounter one of these sharks tend to get a little bit nervous. And that's just one of the critters of the deep that we talk about. See, creatures of the deep water have many more iterations in our imagination. Our Bible has stories of a Leviathan, a great sea creature, the kind of legends. Here's one rendering of that creature from the 19th century, and there are far older renderings that depict a similarly terrifying Leviathan. In fact, the sea monster Godzilla needed nuclear radiation to become somewhat as terrifying as this creature. Our Bible also records in Genesis 1 that in the beginning the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. God's creating is an act of bringing order out of chaos, taming the waters. The water that remains is an abyss, leading to an unknown great deep. In the thought of ancient people, the larger the body of water, the closer it is to that abyss, the more dangerous it is. And so the disciples' fear is amplified by what might come out of that water or what might be lurking there. It is a great unknown, fueled by legends of what might be. So they have every good reason to be afraid. Yet Jesus asks them why they're afraid, chastising them for not having faith. They're working themselves so hard, figuring out everything they could do, panicking more all the time. Finally, desperately, they wake Jesus, wanting him to do something too. They are trying to fix it in any way possible, trying to do something. These disciples, called and beloved, never stop to consider, what do we have? Maybe you're thinking the middle of a storm isn't the time for reflection, like figuring out what they have, making a list, considering the best use of resources. You could be right. But they also seem to have forgotten who Jesus is. They're wondering why on earth Jesus isn't doing something. And I think the better choice would have been to assume that if Jesus is sleeping, then everything must be going to be okay. From the stories of their call, we know at least some of the disciples are fishermen. They've been in storms like this one before. They're used to the sway of small boats on these waves. They know how many people a boat holds and how it moves in response to people moving about. They know what to do when a storm comes up and how to get water out of the boat until it passes. They need only to look to Jesus to be assured it's okay. They should have already known the answer to the question, who is this that even the wind and sea obey him? The fact that Jesus isn't panicking should actually ease their panic, not make it worse. A faith that trusts that God protects and cares for God's beloved people is exactly what David offers when he volunteers to fight Goliath, the mighty Philistine. The king, Saul, isn't so sure the young and small David should go out there. David's response is one of faith, born of experience of God. He answers, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth, and if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God." David said, "The Lord, who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, will save me from the hand of this Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Goliath calls David a dog and taunts him, sure that this child could do nothing against him. David is certain of God's presence with him. And it is Goliath who falls that day, not David. In each story, the people use what is available to them. The disciples bail water and David grabs stones. They don't sit back and wait for God to fix the situation. When the disciples panic, they are nudged to have more faith. They're reminded of what David knew, of what made David so confident God is present with them through the crisis. Now, here is what you should remember. It's okay to feel as if you're drowning. It's okay to feel as if we're drowning It's okay to feel like Jesus is sleeping. But you should remember that if Jesus is sleeping, then you're going to be okay. If the one in charge isn't worried, you shouldn't be either. As we begun our coaching sessions, our last session was naming important events in the history of Chalice. I'll share that timeline with all of you in tomorrow's email and give you the opportunity to add other events. We were so excited talking about Chalice's history that we didn't even get to our personal histories. I'll invite you to do that as well, knowing that we've celebrated baptisms and weddings and funerals together. But I asked a few people who participated in both sessions what the most challenging things in Chalice's history are. Every one of them named something related to money. We know finances haven't been great in Chalice's history. We know we're having conversations about selling our building because we can't afford the building. But you know what? Even though that's true, the boat didn't sink. In the over 8 years I've been at Chalice, everyone has gotten paid on time. We've given cost of living raises to staff. We've never skipped paying a bill because we couldn't afford it. One summer, and only one summer, we needed to wait closer to due dates to pay some bills. It might not sound like a lot, but in the course of Chalice's history, that's a big deal. The seasons that felt like Jesus was asleep on the job passed, even if it required some bailing of water along the way. The ship didn't sink. Even though it felt like the ship might, even though things felt rough, the ship didn't sink, and we did faithful, courageous work along the way. Before building, Chalice resettled refugee families. Those stories are still vital to who Chalice is, and you can ask Jim Barton why it is appropriate to say, in my defense, the last people ate a candle. There was youth group and serving dinner at Paz de Cristo and circles of 8 and so many other things. Then in a building, those things continued. And not long after, Chalice did ministry without a minister, receiving new members, starting new ministries, doing that work for the first time by yourselves. I'm pastor number 2. You'd never done it alone before. Chalice sponsored the resolution calling for full welcome of the LGBTQ community to the denomination during that season. It was that season that added an AA group for the first time. So then when we come to my tenure, we've welcomed numerous AA groups, making people struggling with addiction part of our regular conversations. We were financially confident enough to get a dumpster, which sounds like not a big deal at all, except we couldn't have had so many neighbors in our space without that dumpster. We're still trying to figure out microloans, and we never quite figured out a garden, but we've said yes in so many ways. We've still welcomed refugees and asylum seekers alongside our own talent shows and game nights and baseball games. We're a church known for saying yes to our homeless neighbors when other churches say no, even on Easter Sunday. The boat didn't sink, even if it needed water bailed and everything else. Chalice was faithful in the ministry Jesus entrusted to us. Chalice is faithful in the ministry Jesus entrusts to us. And as we go forward, building or not, we believe that God is with us and has given us gifts for this work, storm or fair winds. Amen.